we have a tool in CDP that's called Data Sync. There's another tool, and we're going to evolve that where you can sync the data between SQL and SQL Azure, which means as long as the schema is similar, it will move it. And then we have tools which will migrate the data. The question will become the following. If your database is larger than the maximum database we support in Azure, that means you have to shard and scale it out from a database perspective. But other than that, there will be tools provided to make that happen. Per database today, we have 50. So we started 1, 5, 10. Now we've increased it to 50 gigs a database. But then you shard it out. To do sharding and have multiple databases scale out, that means you have no limits on it. And the good thing that happens, because these databases are smaller, the performance is very, very high. So to have an internet scale database, you don't want just a monolithic multi-terabyte sitting in one place. So then sharding happens. And we're going to keep increasing the size to a certain limit of the database, so that each one is larger. But ultimately, the modern developer is going to look at things like, how do I architect the database and applications to take advantage of the cloud and start thinking about sharding across the board. So then you can tie it in an unlimited way and not worry about any one large database and how it will function. Because today, Client Edition is not in the cloud per se, right, at all. You consume Azure as a platform, as a service that comes out, and on our business online services, those are the finished services you consume. The client itself is not an online offering to them.
From an end user's perspective, then, talking about authentication in the cloud. So at the moment, we're using Active Directory. We've got our SharePoint servers, CRM servers, everything else, and the users don't worry about authentication. They sign into their computer, off they go. So with the introduction of the cloud, everything, well, a lot of our applications are going to be in the cloud, some hosted by Microsoft, some by potentially VMware on Spring Source, maybe Google Apps, Salesforce. What are Microsoft going to do, or who are they going to work with to make sure that the user can have that experience still, where they're not having to sign into each of these different cloud platforms?
So it'll be a journey.
Yeah.
But having said that, let me tell you what we're doing already. So we do support things like OAuth and everything. So we are open identity federation type of things, and also AD. So if you're using our cloud services, and you correct me if I go off, with our App Fabric Azure services, one of the things is access control, and it does support ADFS and OAuth and everything. We just opened that up. On Windows Azure, you can run Java, you can use PHP, you can use Ruby, you can use .NET, you can use Visual Studio. The concept is to keep it open, period. Because in cloud, we want developers to develop and come on our platform. That's it. And give them the tools our own, and they can use the tools they like to build on the Azure platform, and that's the goal. We're not in just infrastructure as a service type of a business. We are bringing platform as a service into the market, which is a big difference, and that is where the new programming model comes in, where everything scales massively and elastically by definition, where the programmers don't have to worry. The minute an IT guy has to think, and I'm going to dig deeper into how many VMs I gotta buy from this vendor of cloud computing, that's infrastructure as a service. Because why are you worried about the infrastructure? The minute you think about cloud and saying, I'm writing an application, I'm going to deploy that, everything will happen. That's platform as a service, and of course it's more complex than that, but that's where the differentiation is. So most of our competitors are in the infrastructure as a service, giving you today's model that they'll run for you. Very few are investing at the scale of IP, not alone data centers. I mean, that alone is a big scale, but just IP to go bring the services we bring. And then you go to the data centers. Most are not even investing in the data centers at the level we are building them across the world, so we can stand behind a service and not have just outsourced pieces.
Can I ask a question about your infrastructure? Obviously, you've talked a lot about how it's very important that the customer doesn't need to think about how you're doing things behind the scenes, but obviously clearly you do, and you've obviously got a desire to scale things. So what sort of clever software has Microsoft been working on to allow you to scale and manage that environment to make those sort of things work that obviously customers can't do themselves? So
the innovation that we have in Azure is not just going to go to partners, it's going to go to customers. And there are two different scales of things. A bunch of that will end up in Windows Server, SQL Server, all our on-premise products, right? So it's a cycle. It's just I can innovate faster and at a different scale in Azure. And then what makes sense comes down. I'll give you a firm example of that. In R2 of 2008, boot from VHD came from the Azure learning, right? Quick. So a bunch of that will come down, definitely. Then it comes, what do we take to the partners? Same thing, the HP and I'll use that. Then operating data centers, and I'll use HP as an example. They have a lot of IP there. I mean, they have management products and they have IP there, and they use that. Where they feel like our offerings are better, they can use that because at that point they become a customer. And then the last but not least is, well, a lot of time the customer wants end-to-end Azure. That's that appliance, which HP actually is getting it. They're the top 3 partners, the first 3 partners were getting it, HP, Dell, and Fujitsu. So it'll come in different variations. Some innovation that's going to be in Azure will not make sense for on-prem. It just won't, so that won't trickle down. The ones that does will come. Some on-prem thinking is going to go push itself into Azure. Then Azure itself as an appliance will go out, so partners and others can use it at scale. And then customers can use it again as an appliance or the innovation that trickles down. The idea is to keep that cycle going. It'll just be at a different time frame because of the release cycles are different. Roughly 60+% of the developers in Microsoft are involved in cloud, or 70% are involved in cloud one way or the other, and it's just going to go higher and higher. Every server that we have, pretty much, has a service component in the cloud, right? So every one of us thinks the cloud, and I'll tell you the same statement I made initially, that look, as IT professionals, we evolve. How many were talking 10 years or 8 years ago, virtualization versus now? Much more, you were early, but much more now. Even within Microsoft, how many of us were talking cloud 5 years ago versus today? I will tell you, it's a lot more of us who understand more about cloud today than 5 years ago. And same here. 5 years ago, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about cloud. Word was coming in, was trying to get mainstream traction, and now it's a vernacular. Everybody knows virtualization, and we're getting that, but that's the evolution. Great. Thank you so much. I know this takes a lot of time, so thank you for attending, and good questions.